If you like storytime vibes, hit subscribe and let's dive in together.
You don't truly understand humiliation until you spend 6 hours wandering through a city that suddenly feels too big, too cruel, searching for the woman who promised to love you, only to realize every stranger knows exactly where she is and exactly what she's doing. Except you. The night started with Isabella laughing in the warm glow of the corporate party, her hand resting comfortably on my arm, the picture of a devoted wife. I was proud of her, proud of us. But beneath that practiced smile, there was always that hungry flicker in her eyes, a need for external validation I'd foolishly confused with ambition. When I saw her slip away with Mark, that corporate leech who wore his poor choices like a badge of honor, the kind of man everyone at the firm kept a safe, judgmental distance from, a knot tightened in my chest. The whispers around the room stopped. It wasn't just a friendly chat. It was a spectacle. Everyone saw it. Everyone knew before I did. I spent the next 6 hours doing the unthinkable, roaming the city like a desperate, pathetic fool, calling every number, checking every dead-end location, while she was actively, deliberately ignoring my anxiety. The panic wasn't just fear for her safety. It was the sickening realization that she didn't care about my worry. My frantic texts, "Where are you? Please answer, Bella," weren't just unanswered. They were dismissed. They were a nuisance to her thrill. That's when the panic curdled into a cold, lethal rage. Not the yelling kind. The quiet, the surgical kind. She was out there testing boundaries, finding herself thrillingly desired, while I was reduced to a frantic, easily discarded safety net. The sheer contempt in that action was a physical blow. The insult wasn't the flirting. It was the 6 hours of knowing I was suffering and choosing to let me twist in the wind. When I got back to our dark, silent house, I didn't turn on the lights. I just sat in the living room, a statue of a man, waiting for the inevitable, humiliating return. I wasn't waiting for a wife. I was waiting for the final piece of evidence. It was dawn when the key finally turned in the lock. 6:30 a.m. She stumbled in, her hair messy, the scent of stale liquor and cheap foreign cologne clinging to her like a shroud. I watched her from the darkness of the armchair. She was instantly thrown. She had expected a screaming match, maybe tears, the usual emotional firework display that she knew how to manipulate. She was prepared for a fight, but I gave her a void. My face was drained of color, my hands clenched, but I said nothing. Complete silence. That silence was my weapon, heavy with unstated accusations. Then came her feeble, pathetic excuse. I was so tired, Elijah. I must have just drunk too much and fallen asleep at a friend's place. I'm sorry. The lie was paper thin. She didn't even bother to name the friend. She looked directly into my eyes and delivered that scrap of a lie. And in that moment, I saw the true depth of her contempt. She believed I was stupid enough to buy it. She believed our relationship was built on such a flimsy foundation of trust that a few mumbled words would be enough to smooth over 6 hours of betrayal and public humiliation. The audacity was staggering. She still views me as the safe harbor, the fool who will always be there, easily managed and instantly forgiving. The realization was a nauseating, dizzying drop. I just stared, letting the silence swallow her cheap explanation. Her fear was visible now, but it wasn't the fear of losing me. It was the fear of being inconvenienced. She tried to cross the room, a clumsy attempt to embrace me, to use physical proximity to paper over the crack. I simply raised a hand, a small, cold barrier that stopped her dead in her tracks. My eyes were the only thing moving, and they were speaking volumes. I see you. I know. She recoiled, the shame finally hitting her, but I could still sense that core confidence within her. He'll forgive me. He always does. I am safe. That unshakable belief was the final unforgivable insult. She had already signed her own divorce papers. I just hadn't told her yet. 4 hours passed. The sun was fully up, casting harsh, unforgiving light on the wreckage of our perfect life. We sat in the living room in absolute, suffocating silence. Every tick of the clock was a hammer blow against the glass facade of our marriage. I didn't want to scream. Screaming would have given her the emotional relief she secretly craved, a drama to hide behind. I wanted her to feel the weight of my judgment, the sheer gravity of her reckless, contemptuous behavior. I wanted her to see the man she had shattered, not the husband she had tried to manipulate. I replayed the entire night in my head. Her laughter with Mark, the knowing glances from my colleagues, my frantic, useless search, and finally, that cheap, insulting lie. She hadn't just made a mistake. She had calculated the risk, prioritized her own thrill over my peace, and utterly misjudged my love. The most painful realization was that she saw me as replaceable, a certainty, a permanent fixture whose feelings were secondary to her fleeting desires. She had underestimated the depth of my love and, more crucially, my capacity for self-respect. Finally, I spoke. My voice was a whisper, a low, measured tone that resonated with a chilling finality. It was terrifyingly calm. I didn't ask what she had done. I asked, "Do you understand what you've done?" No fury, no accusation of infidelity, just that one devastating question loaded with 4 hours of silent, agonizing contemplation. That was the psychological climax. It wasn't a question, but a statement of complete, unrepairable damage. Her eyes widened. The disappointment in my voice, devoid of any anger, cut deeper than any shout could have. It drove home the fact that she hadn't just upset her husband. She had shattered the man who trusted her implicitly. She tried to babble, to rationalize it as just a harmless flirtation. But her words fell flat, crushed beneath the weight of my gaze. The silent judgment was 1,000 times worse than the confrontation she had imagined. The process of detachment was complete. She was a stranger in my house. The days that followed were a clinical, desolate nightmare. I moved through our apartment like a ghost, avoiding her glances, speaking only in monosyllables about bills or work. This distance wasn't punishment. It was me beginning the process of severing the cord. She tried to bridge the chasm with small gestures, but every attempt felt like cheap paint over a gaping hole. She still doesn't get it, I thought with a detached, chilling clarity. She still believes a few nice dinners will fix the fact that she disgraced me publicly and infected our private life with her reckless 6-hour mistake. Then came the definitive, unforgivable confirmation. It wasn't a confession. It was a sterile, impersonal email from HR concerning the mandatory annual health checkups. Our company uses the same clinic and handles follow-ups discreetly. An HR friend, a loyal one, a man who saw Isabella leave with Mark, passed me an unofficial warning. The checkups had flagged Isabella and, crucially, Mark, with the same easily treatable but undeniably shameful sexually transmitted infection. My world didn't spin. It didn't explode. It simply cracked into a million shards of broken glass. The nausea was immediate. The lie, I was so tired and fell asleep, didn't just become unbelievable. It became vile. It became an active physical threat to my health, to my life. I was no longer just the humiliated husband. I was the potential victim of her cheap 6-hour thrill. That's the deepest level of contempt, not just cheating, but bringing the biological consequences of that disregard into our home. She had turned me into an accessory to her shame. The insult was no longer just emotional. It was biological, and it was public knowledge among those who needed to know. She had not only broken my trust, but she had also jeopardized my well-being and smeared my name in the most intimate and repulsive way possible. I looked at her across the dinner table that night, the picture of a concerned, if slightly annoyed, wife. I said nothing about the email, but in my mind, the final piece of evidence was secured. The judge had ruled. The conviction was made. The sentence was clear. A week later, I sat her down for the long, honest conversation she had been dreading. She expected an argument about the flirtation, perhaps a tearful reconciliation. What she got was the death blow. I didn't mention the STI. That was for the lawyers, a piece of irrefutable, ugly evidence that negated all possibilities of reconciliation or shared custody of our life. I kept it purely focused on her contempt and the complete annihilation of my respect. My voice was, as always, quiet, composed, and utterly final. I can't do this anymore, Isabella. She opened her mouth to argue, but I held up a hand. I don't need a wife who needs to disappear for 6 hours with a man everyone despises just to feel thrilled. I don't need a partner who views my love as a cushion for her recklessness. I need someone who respects me, who values me, and who doesn't disappear without a word, treating my anxiety like a joke. I had imagined the screaming, the begging, the dramatic collapse. Instead, when the words, "I am filing for divorce, effective immediately," left my mouth, she looked confused. She still believed this was a negotiation. But Elijah, it was just a mistake. A small mistake. And there it was, the final, most crushing insult of all, the line that confirmed I had made the right choice, the one I had been waiting for all along. That one, single sentence. I leaned forward, my eyes boring into hers, delivering the sentence I had constructed during those 4 hours of silent judgment. Isabella, you thought you could control the moment, but you cannot control the consequences. Your 6 hours of fun cost you our entire life, and you did it for Mark. I stood up and walked away. She lost everything. The divorce was swift, brutal, and asymmetrical. Her reputation in the firm was already poisoned by the whispers and the eventual, unavoidable revelation of the health records. She lost her standing, her financial security, and the safety of our home. Her careless fun, her belief that she was untouchable, had turned her into a cautionary tale. She traded a secure, loving future for 6 humiliating hours, and the final bill, which included her self-respect, had just been delivered. The silence, the humiliation, the shattered trust, it was all worth it to ensure that she fully, painfully understood the price of her contempt. She thought she was buying a moment of thrill. She ended up paying with her entire life. Never mistake a man's silence for weakness. Sometimes it's just the sound of a closing door.